The highest-ranking woman in Pentagon history is in Australia at the moment, the US Undersecretary of Defence, Michèle Flournoy. I spoke to her a bit earlier about the recent Marines announcement during President Obama's visit and other issues. Undersecretary of Defence for Policy, Michèle Flournoy, thank you very much for your time. I want to ask you, first of all, about your meeting with the Deputy Chief of Staff of the People's Liberation Army this week. Will you seek to ease concerns, placate the concerns in Beijing about the recent announcement during President Obama's visit of a rotation of Marines and an expanded role for the US military in Australia?
One of the principles that we've been trying to advance in our relationship with China, particularly on the military side, is that of transparency. So whenever we make a major decision, we conduct a major review, we rewrite a strategy, we try to make the best effort to very quickly after sit down with our Chinese counterparts and talk it through. So as I sit down with my Chinese friends for our annual talks, I expect to spend some time talking about how we're looking at our posture in the region more broadly, and then specifically the announcement that President Obama and the Prime Minister made on Marines here in Australia.
Because there has been some sensitivity in Beijing about the announcement, a suggestion from the Defence Ministry that it is a continuation of Cold War thinking.
I think one of the things that I will be explaining to my Chinese friends is this is about investing in a very long-standing alliance with Australia. Australia is one of our closest allies in the world. We have fought every war together. It's hard to think of a military that we work more closely with. And first and foremost, this is about being able to do more bilateral training, more bilateral exercising together, and hold on to the interoperability that we've gained over the years.
So it's not about containment or encircling?
It really isn't. We don't seek to contain. China's rising. And I think there are very positive aspects to that. We are seeking to work with China to integrate them into the region, try to ensure that they buy into the international norms that have provided for stability and economic prosperity in the region. But no one's trying to contain China. I don't think it's possible to contain China. And so I'm going to walk through this with them, what it is and what it isn't, and try to reassure them that they don't need to be. This is not designed against them. It's not something they need to worry about.
Our former Prime Minister, Paul Keating, has expressed concern about the message sent in President Obama's speech. More, not so much the message, but the location of where the message was sent, i.e. this Parliament. Can you understand those concerns from some of our political leadership?
Well, I think President Obama was very pleased to be invited to the Parliament to speak. And I think that given the strategy and budget review we've been going through, where we are facing constraints on our budget, he wanted to send a reassuring message to the region that even as we make some budget adjustments ourselves, our priority remains on Asia, on, as he said, security, prosperity, human rights, the things that we've invested in for decades in Asia. We want to keep that investment even as we face some additional budgetary pressures.
There is a suggestion that some think tanks, certainly around the United States, Australia and India, would have been proposing a trilateral security pact between the three nations. Do you think that that's a prospect?
I think there's tremendous opportunity for many combinations of cooperation among partners and friends in the region. But this alliance is really unique. And I think we're always going to start from the premise of what can we do together, and then based on that foundation, think about what more can we do with others in the region as well.
Well, there's been some analysis suggesting that Australia's agreement to sell uranium, or ending a policy of banning uranium exports to India, was part of an effort by the United States to build up India as a counterbalance to China. What do you make of that analysis?
I don't believe that decision was really influenced significantly by the United States. That was an Australian decision, I think, taken based on Australian interests. We do believe that India is also a rising power. They are a democracy. They share many of our interests. They are a partner we want to work with. And we are very supportive of any kind of positive relationship that develops between Australia and India. But certainly we are not seeking to actively shape or influence that. That's really up to the Australian government.
There are obviously sensitivities in Beijing about those relations as well. Tell me, do you think that there's the need for a greater access to dialogue between the leadership of the United States and China? Your talks with the Deputy Chief of Staff of the People's Liberation Army, is really the highest level of dialogue on a regular basis between the two defence establishments. Should there be a higher mechanism by which the leaders can talk? For example, like during the Cold War, there was the hotline where the White House could talk straight to the Kremlin.
There is a very multifaceted dialogue, starting at the top. President Obama and President Hu have met multiple times. Anytime they find themselves at a summit together, there's always a bilateral meeting. They call each other. They speak quite frequently. At the Secretary of State level, Secretary Clinton meets her counterpart all the time. Secretary Panetta will receive his counterpart when they come to Washington. The dialogue at my level is the sort of more routine annual dialogue where we work through a lot of issues and opportunities to start working together more as militaries. And so I think the relationship is actually quite rich, and there's a lot that's quite positive too in terms of finding areas of cooperation.
Is there a mechanism by which to diffuse a flare-up, for example, in the South China Sea?
Absolutely. We do have a defense link, a hotline, if you will, and that's been it's never been used in crisis, but it's been tested to make sure that it works and such. But more importantly, we have a whole set of arrangements and regular discussions having to do with maritime safety and security to make sure that when our forces are in close proximity to one another, that they operate safely, that we avoid any risk of tactical miscalculations that could result in a larger strategic incident.
And just finally, on the presence of the Marines, this rotation, do you see the prospect of that expanding? Can you see any worth in looking at this as a starting point, but increasing beyond the 25,000 Marines, which this is going to peak at?
Yeah, 2,500.
Oh, sorry, 2,500 Marines, yeah.
But I think it'll be up to 2,500. But I do think this particular initiative grew out of a much larger discussion where we're looking at lots of different ways to cooperate. There's some work that our Air Forces want to do together. There's some work that our Navies already do together. There may be further things that we identify in the future. I think part of the nature of such an active and deep alliance is that we will continue to find opportunities to enrich that partnership, and we're open to those over time.
And potential military bases in Australia?
I don't think there'll ever be U.S. bases here. We are coming in as guests of the Australian government with their consent and at their invitation to work with the Australian military at Australian facilities.
Under Secretary of Defence for Policy, Michèle Flournoy, I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.